Good evening. Tonight, we begin with something as extraordinary and unprecedented as it is dangerous for European security and overall international stability. A major leak has revealed a top-secret Russian military strategy, detailing President Vladimir Putin's plans for a dramatic escalation of the ongoing war. The leaked documents confirm that Russia is preparing for a full-scale military offensive that could pull NATO into direct conflict with Russian forces. This could be the most significant shift in European security in decades. The leaked plan describes a multi-phase offensive across Eastern Europe, with the central objective of crippling NATO's military infrastructure and securing Russia's dominance over the region. NATO officials are already in crisis mode, calling emergency meetings and ramping up their defensive postures. Experts warn that if Putin proceeds with his plans, the consequences for global peace could be catastrophic. NATO's response has been swift and decisive. The alliance is now preparing for the possibility of total war with Russia, with some analysts suggesting that we are on the brink of a conflict that could rival the Cold War in its intensity and scope. For the past few years, the world has watched as Russia's actions in Ukraine and the surrounding region have grown increasingly aggressive. But the leaked documents have now confirmed what many feared. Putin is prepared to escalate the situation to unprecedented levels. This is no longer just about Ukraine. The entire security structure of Europe is under threat. NATO, which has been strengthening its presence in Eastern Europe, is now mobilizing on a scale unseen since the height of the Cold War. With the information in these leaked documents, NATO leaders are facing a terrifying reality. The threat of a full-scale war with Russia is no longer a distant possibility, it is an immediate concern. The strategic plan outlines specific goals for Russian forces, including securing key energy routes, crippling NATO's command infrastructure, and preparing to launch cyberattacks against Western allies. Putin's goal, according to the documents, is to destroy NATO's ability to respond quickly to Russian aggression and to force European nations into submission through a combination of military pressure and economic warfare. These revelations come at a time when NATO is already concerned about Russia's nuclear arsenal and its willingness to use it in the event of a direct confrontation. The leak has sent shockwaves through NATO capitals, where leaders are now scrambling to formulate a response that can deter Putin while avoiding escalation into open warfare. But the clock is ticking. NATO's military analysts are already reviewing the leaked documents, which provide a detailed timeline for Russia's planned moves. According to the intelligence, Putin is planning a rapid, coordinated assault on several fronts, using both conventional forces and special operations units. The leaked plan also suggests that Russia intends to deploy advanced missile systems capable of striking NATO targets deep within Europe, with the potential for devastating consequences. NATO's military command is now facing an unprecedented challenge. The alliance is preparing for an all-out confrontation, but it is clear that this is no longer just a defensive posture. The leaked documents suggest that Russia is preparing for a long-term conflict, with plans to seize strategic territories and extend its influence over the entire continent. For NATO, the stakes have never been higher. The leaked information suggests that Putin sees NATO as the ultimate obstacle to his vision of a resurgent Russia and is willing to risk everything, including a potential nuclear conflict, to crush the alliance and secure his position as the dominant power in Europe. At the same time, the leak has exposed deep divisions within NATO itself. Some member states are pushing for a more aggressive response to Russia's plans, while others are calling for caution, fearing that any escalation could trigger a full-blown war. These internal divisions are complicating NATO's ability to craft a unified response to Russia's growing threat. The leaked documents also shed light on Russia's plans for cyber warfare. According to the intelligence, Russia is preparing to launch a series of cyber attacks against NATO's command systems, aiming to cripple the alliance's ability to communicate and coordinate its forces in the event of a direct confrontation. The document also details Russia's efforts to target NATO's critical infrastructure, including power grids, communications networks, and military supply chains. These cyber attacks, which could potentially cripple NATO's operations, are being described as the first phase of Russia's planned offensive. The second phase, according to the leak, involves a massive land assault targeting key NATO member states in Eastern Europe, including Poland, Romania, and the Baltics. Putin's forces are expected to launch a multi-pronged attack with the goal of seizing key cities and military installations before NATO has a chance to mount a coordinated defense. NATO's leaders are now debating whether to preemptively strike against Russian forces in an effort to delay or disrupt Putin's plans. However, the risk of provoking a wider conflict remains high, and many military analysts are warning that such a move could lead to the destruction of Europe as we know it. The most chilling aspect of the leaked plan is Putin's apparent willingness to escalate the conflict by using nuclear weapons if necessary. According to the documents, Russia is preparing for a scenario in which NATO directly engages Russian forces on the ground. The plan includes provisions for nuclear strikes on key NATO military facilities, including air bases and missile defense systems. In the coming days, NATO's leaders will be forced to make difficult decisions. Should they accept the risk of a direct confrontation with Russia, or should they attempt to de-escalate the situation by making concessions to Putin? The world is watching as these questions are debated in the highest echelons of European power. The leak has exposed Russia's true intentions, and the time for diplomatic negotiations is rapidly running out. Europe's security is now at greater risk than ever before, and the future of NATO is uncertain. As the alliance prepares for the possibility of total war, the question remains, will Putin's secret plan succeed, or will NATO's resolve be enough to stop him? The next 48 hours could determine the future of Europe and the world. The stakes are higher than ever, and the consequences of failure are unimaginable. NATO's response will be pivotal in shaping the outcome of this dangerous new chapter in the conflict with Russia. The clock is ticking, and the world waits to see what Putin's next move will be. As the 48-hour deadline approaches, NATO is bracing for the possibility of an all-out war with Russia. The alliance's military experts are working around the clock to assess the leaked intelligence and come up with a strategy that can counter Putin's impending offensive. But this is no easy task. The sheer scale of Russia's preparations, combined with its growing nuclear capabilities, makes the situation incredibly volatile. NATO's leadership is acutely aware of the risks of underestimating Putin's resolve. The leaked documents paint a picture of an increasingly desperate and aggressive Russian leader. Putin is fully aware that a direct confrontation with NATO could spell disaster for his country, but his ambitions to dominate Europe and revive Russian imperial power may outweigh the dangers of full-scale war. In his mind, this may be the only way to secure Russia's future in a world that he believes is trying to isolate and humiliate his nation. The leaked documents also reveal how Putin plans to use hybrid warfare to achieve his objective. Russia's strategy includes a combination of traditional military operations, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and economic sabotage. The goal is to undermine NATO from within while simultaneously launching a rapid military offensive that catches the alliance off guard. According to the documents, Russia's plan calls for psychological operations aimed at sowing division among NATO member states, with particular emphasis on exploiting political tensions in countries like Germany, Hungary, and France, where anti-NATO sentiment is already prevalent. This multi-pronged approach is designed to destabilize the alliance before a single shot is fired. If successful, it could fracture NATO's unity, making it harder for the alliance to mount an effective defense against the Russian onslaught. The leaked intelligence suggests that Russia is preparing for the possibility of political destabilization in several NATO countries, using misinformation and covert support for far-right political movements to create division. This has raised alarms within NATO, as leaders now fear that Russia may try to weaken the alliance by exploiting its internal weaknesses. In response, NATO's intelligence agencies are working in overdrive to shore up defenses against these hybrid threats. The alliance is already moving to strengthen its cyber defenses and counterintelligence capabilities, with a focus on protecting critical infrastructure from Russian cyber attacks. The possibility of cyber attacks disrupting NATO's communication systems and military coordination remains one of the biggest concerns, as the leak confirms that Russia plans to launch attacks on key military networks and power grids across Europe. But NATO's concerns do not stop at cyber warfare. As tensions rise, NATO is also considering the possibility of preemptive strikes against Russian military positions in Eastern Europe. While some NATO leaders advocate for immediate military action to forestall Russia's offensive, others argue that any move to escalate could be catastrophic. A preemptive strike risks provoking Russia into a direct confrontation that could spiral into a full-scale nuclear exchange. As a result, NATO has been forced to confront the nuclear threat head-on. The leaked documents show that Putin is fully prepared to escalate the conflict to the nuclear level if NATO intervenes directly. Russian military doctrine has long emphasized the use of nuclear weapons as a way to neutralize superior conventional forces. In the event of a direct confrontation, the documents indicate that Russia may view nuclear escalation as an acceptable course of action, potentially targeting NATO military bases, key infrastructure, and even Western cities in an effort to break the alliance's will. The potential for nuclear warfare has sent shockwaves through the leadership of NATO member countries, many of which are still reeling from the legacy of Cold War-era tensions. NATO's commitment to deterrence has long been its primary strategy for countering Russian aggression, but the specter of nuclear weapons now looms looms large. NATO's nuclear posture is being rapidly reassessed as the alliance prepares for the possibility that Putin will not hesitate to use his nuclear arsenal to achieve his geopolitical goals. Simultaneously, NATO is working to reinforce its conventional forces in Eastern Europe. The alliance has already begun deploying more troops and advanced weaponry to its member states on Russia's western border, including new air defense systems, missile interceptors, and tactical nuclear weapons. The U.S. has agreed to send more advanced fighter jets to Eastern Europe, while European countries are increasing their military budgets and retooling their defense strategies in preparation for a potential Russian invasion. But even with these preparations, NATO leaders are deeply divided on how to respond. Some countries, particularly the Baltic states and Poland, are urging immediate action, warning that any delay in responding to Putin's plans will only make the situation worse. These countries, which are on the front lines of any potential Russian attack, fear that NATO's current military posture is insufficient to deter a Russian invasion. On the other hand, countries like France and Germany are more cautious. They argue that escalating the situation with Russia could lead to an all-out war that would devastate the entire continent. These leaders are calling for a diplomatic solution, although they too acknowledge that the time for negotiations is quickly running out. The leak of Putin's military plans has only intensified the pressure on NATO, leaving the alliance with few good options. The situation is further complicated by the growing uncertainty within Russia itself. The leaked documents indicate that internal dissent is rising within Putin's inner circle, with some high-ranking military officials and political elites questioning the wisdom of a full-scale war with NATO. However, Putin's tight grip on power and his desire to avoid appearing weak may prevent him from backing down, even if his military leaders are hesitant. As NATO faces the reality of a potential conflict with Russia, the stakes could not be higher. A full-scale war with Russia would likely involve massive casualties, widespread destruction, and a profound shift in the global balance of power. The global economy, already weakened by the ongoing war in Ukraine, would be plunged into chaos. Energy markets would be disrupted, food prices would skyrocket, and the international financial system could collapse under the weight of the conflict. The world would be thrown into a new era of instability, one where nuclear war is no longer a distant threat, but a real possibility. NATO's response to Putin's secret plan will shape the future of global security. The alliance faces a difficult choice: escalate the conflict and risk triggering World War III, or find a way to de-escalate and negotiate a peace with a leader who has shown time and again that he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The clock is ticking, and the world watches as NATO's leaders deliberate on how to confront the most dangerous geopolitical crisis of the 21st century. As the tension continues to build, NATO's leadership is preparing for a decision that could define the future of Europe for decades to come. With the intelligence leak confirming Putin's aggressive military strategy, the alliance faces a stark reality. It must either confront Russia head-on or risk abandoning its role as the protector of European security. For NATO, this is not just about defending its member states, it's about preserving the integrity of the international order that has held since the end of the Cold War. The leaked documents have not only revealed Putin's ambitions for a direct assault on NATO, but also shed light on Russia's longer-term strategy to undermine the West. According to the intelligence, Putin intends to use energy leverage, economic pressure, and information warfare to weaken NATO from within before launching a full-scale military campaign. Russia's broader strategy, based on the idea of creating chaos and instability in the West, is designed to fracture the unity of the alliance and limit NATO's ability to respond effectively to his advances. One of the most alarming aspects of Putin's secret plan is his calculation that a direct confrontation with NATO could lead to the eventual collapse of the European Union. By using hybrid tactics and economic disruption, Russia seeks to stoke political divisions within NATO member countries, particularly focusing on those with weaker political cohesion, such as Hungary and Italy. Russia's goal is to create a divide between NATO countries, causing internal strife and making it difficult for the alliance to mount a unified defense against Russian aggression. The leaked plan also outlines Russian preparations for a cyber offensive, which experts believe will play a central role in the initial phase of the war. Putin's forces are reportedly targeting NATO's military infrastructure, including communication systems, early warning radar networks, and air defense systems. The goal is to blind NATO to Russia's movements and limit the alliance's ability to coordinate an effective response to the impending assault. As cyber capabilities are rapidly increasing, NATO's reliance on digital infrastructure makes it highly vulnerable to such an attack. In addition to cyber warfare, The documents highlight Russian plans for disinformation campaigns aimed at undermining public support for NATO in key member states. This would involve false narratives designed to exploit existing political divisions, particularly focusing on anti-NATO sentiment and growing isolationist movements within Europe and the United States. Russia's aim is to weaken domestic political support for NATO, making it harder for European leaders to commit to a full-scale war effort. NATO's internal discussions are heated. Some member states argue that they must act swiftly and decisively to prevent Russia from gaining the upper hand, with military strategies being updated daily. But leaders in Germany and France are more cautious, fearing that escalation could lead to a disastrous war that neither side can afford. The risk of nuclear escalation has raised significant concerns, and discussions are underway regarding how to counter Russia's growing nuclear arsenal without provoking a full-scale conflict. The documents also reveal the extent to which Russian military technology has advanced in recent years. Russia has significantly increased its stockpile of advanced missile systems, including hypersonic missiles capable of evading NATO's missile defense system. The leaked plan outlines a rapid strike strategy designed to overwhelm NATO's defenses, targeting military bases, logistical hubs, and airstrikes on key infrastructure. This new technological edge means that NATO must not only increase its conventional military presence in Eastern Europe, but also accelerate the development of cutting-edge countermeasures to defend against Russia's advanced weaponry. NATO is already increasing its missile defense systems and air superiority fighters, but experts argue that these efforts may not be enough to match Russia's technological capabilities in the event of a full-scale conflict. At the same time, NATO faces internal political pressures. Countries like Poland, the Baltics, and Romania are calling for immediate military support to protect their territories from the potential Russian assault. These nations, located at the front line of any Russian attack, feel increasingly vulnerable and are pushing for a stronger NATO response. However, other member states, particularly in Western Europe, are concerned about the long-term economic and social costs of a full-scale military engagement with Russia. As NATO prepares for the worst, there are growing concerns about the readiness of the alliance's forces. Despite the significant buildup of NATO troops in Eastern Europe, it is unclear whether the alliance can mount a rapid response to Russia's multi-front assault. Some analysts argue that NATO's forces may be spread too thin across multiple regions, which could make it difficult for the alliance to counter Russia's offensive in a coordinated and efficient manner. The specter of nuclear war continues to loom over the entire situation. NATO's nuclear deterrence strategy has always been a central pillar of its defense posture. But the prospect of facing a nuclear-armed adversary like Russia has thrown this strategy into question. Putin's willingness to use nuclear weapons in the event of a direct confrontation is a chilling thought for NATO officials. As the war in Ukraine continues to rage, the question of whether NATO will be able to contain Russia's nuclear ambitions without provoking a nuclear escalation remains one of the most pressing concerns in international diplomacy. Amid all the uncertainty, NATO's leaders know that they must make a choice, and soon. The next 48 hours could determine the course of the war. The alliance faces a crucial decision. Will they act decisively to defend Europe and confront Russia's increasing aggression, or will they attempt to negotiate a peace in the face of overwhelming pressure from Putin's regime? The clock is ticking, and time is running out. One thing is clear. The world is on the brink of a new and terrifying chapter in the ongoing conflict between NATO and Russia. With Russia's military buildup, the threat of cyberattacks, nuclear escalation, and the growing internal divisions within NATO, the situation is becoming more volatile by the day. The coming hours will decide whether Europe can avoid the catastrophic consequences of a full-scale war, or whether NATO will be forced to engage Russia in a confrontation that could have far-reaching consequences for the future of the continent and the world. As the countdown continues, world leaders are watching closely, knowing that the decisions made in these next crucial days could reshape the global order. What happens next will echo through history as a defining moment in the ongoing struggle for power and security in Europe and beyond.